Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site that covers the Arizona Cardinals, and this is one of our yearly opponent preview shows where we try to do, the attempt is to do 14 shows, one per opponent. We're bring in, ideally, one of the writers that covers the Cardinals 2025 opponents for our sister sites on the NFL Wire. And the Cardinals will open the season on the road in week 1 against the New Orleans Saints. Joining me on the show, special guest from the Saints Wire, the managing editor over there is John Sigler. I believe this is your first foray onto my show since I started doing this. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. And sorry for the technical issues leading up to this particular moment in time.
Oh, man, don't sweat it at all. Thanks so much for having me on the program. And looking forward to get started here and talk some football on this very sunny June afternoon.
Yes, it is. How is it where you're at? We're like, I know we're going through a heat wave in the country here in the Phoenix area. That's just June. And we all have air conditioning. And so when it gets 115 degrees outside, we just hide inside our capes. How is it where you're at?
You know, much of the same. The big difference, I've been told, I've had some friends who lived in Arizona for a few years. They came back here to the Mississippi Gulf Coast right outside New Orleans. It's really the humidity is the big difference.
Yeah.
So I woke up this morning. It was 73 degrees out, but the real feel, accounting for the 93% humidity at 7 o'clock this morning. The real field temp was about 85, 86, I think. So I'm very, very much enjoying being inside this time of the day.
Well, the thing about this time of year is like dry heat, humid heat. Like when we walk outside here, it feels like literally an oven. If you've ever opened the oven after baking something, that rush of air that comes out when you walk outside at this time of year, around here, that's what it's like, and it's relentless. But I've lived here my life, so it's all good. I'm used to it. So let's start with the Saints season last year, which was, it started out like, I would have to say from my end, little expectations when it came to the Saints, but they play in an NFC South division that is always winnable, and then they come out and put up 47 on the Panthers and 44 on the Cowboys, and then lose by 3 to Philadelphia. And we're like, wait, are the Saints good? And then it turns out they weren't. And the fact that you guys put up that many points on the Panthers and the Cowboys was just as much about the fact that the Panthers and the Cowboys were abysmal last season. But you win the first 2, you drop 7 in a row, then win 2, then lose 5 out of the last 6. Tell me, how was that season last year? And did it basically come down to, like, how much of that was simply Derek Carr getting hurt, and how much of that was simply they overachieved those first 2 weeks?
I really want to believe what we saw those first 2 weeks was real, because Clint Kubiak, was talking about what to expect and how we're going to have a very efficient passing game. We're going to really lean on the run game. And that's what we saw those first 2 weeks. I mean, Derek Carr only threw like 19 passes in that Cowboys game, but he gained 230 something yards off of them. So it really seemed like things were going according to plan from what Clint Kubiak and Dennis Allen had drawn up over the summer, what we had seen in training camp. And then things just went sideways pretty early in the season, and injuries were a major factor. That's really injuries is what has kind of been the company line since then, not just to Derek Carr, but to everybody around him. You had Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, both missed extensive time. They didn't really invest in wide receivers behind those guys. and things kind of just went off the rails. Some birds came home to roost defensively, where they've been leaning on, guys who are past their prime, like Cameron Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, Cards legend, of course, Demario Davis. They have these cornerstone players at all three levels of the defense who are all like 32, 33 or older. And we saw those guys lose a step, kind of one by one, and slow down and not react quite as quickly as they used to, and not be able to make the plays that they used to. And the defense kind of just fell off with it. So injuries, age, poor roster construction, it kind of all combined for a perfect storm and the worst season that Saints fans have seen in 20, 21 years.
Which is something, considering that, I am old enough to remember the bag on the head Saints teams from the 90s. Not that the Cardinals were not that the Cardinals have ever been anything like the Cardinals have been a bad franchise historically, but I remember as a teenager when the Cardinals came to Arizona, and then the joke about the Saints, they were the Aints, but then Drew Brees really, like, once Drew Brees got there and Sean Payton, it really changed everything. And now they're going through the rebuild, which brings us to the off season. And you have a new head coach, Kellen Moore. You think you're getting Derek Carr back until he realizes in the middle of the offseason that he needs shoulder surgery that's going to end his season, and he decides to retire instead. So let's start with Kellen Moore. How much optimism is there for Moore as a head coach?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of optimism, just from him being a new hire, a new face, and a new fresh perspective. I'll tell you, the biggest fear for a lot of Saints fans was that they were just going to hire someone they knew, being the front office. They were going to go out and get like Mike McCarthy, excuse me. And that would just be he's one of us. We're in the same country club. This is our guy. We're just going to kind of keep doing what we're doing. And that was the fear. And obviously that didn't come to pass. They went and got the Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator, the former college superstar quarterback, the guy who I want to say he's like, gosh, I hate that I don't have the exact number off the top of my head right now, but I think he's only like 18 months older than the oldest player on the roster right now.
I remember when Kellen Moore was quarterbacking.
Yeah. Well, dude, so that's something I looked into, was how much time separated his last pass in the NFL and Tyler Shuck's first pass in college.
Oh, my gosh.
How big would you say that gap is? Just because I do have this off the top of my head.
What is about 3 years? That's just a guess.
Yeah, that's not a bad guess. It's a year and 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh!
Between Kellen's last pass in a Cowboys preseason game against Derek Carr's Raiders, by the way, and the first snaps that Shuck got with the Oregon Ducks, his first college team before he had a couple of injuries, had to transfer around, and now they're together. So I would say there's a lot of optimism just because Kellen Moore is getting to do things his way, and he has a fresh perspective, and he's not someone who has kind of been riding off of Sean Payton and Drew Brees' coattails. And yeah, it's exciting, seeing him like going out and playing paintball with the players at a team bonding event. I don't know that there's a lot of head coaches who would go out and do that right now. Or gosh, what else did they do? They went into this. Alvin Kamara owns his own version of Top Golf here in New Orleans. It's called a 504, the FORE. That's also the area code in New Orleans proper. And so they had a team bonding event there. Kellen Moore went, the coaches went, and that's really cool to see. And that goes a long way because, by the time his tenure had run out, Dennis Allen was really seen as like this kind of hands-off management type, wasn't very popular with the players, didn't give fans a lot of reasons to get excited. He's this defensive head honcho whose defense is getting run all over each week. And this is a really big change in the opposite direction with a younger guy with an offensive background who just won a Super Bowl in New Orleans. If fans are excited, and I think rightfully so.
And then you bring in Brandon Staley as the defensive coordinator. You've got Doug. Now I'm sure New Orleans, and I'm seeing this now for the first time because I don't pay a ton. I don't follow the Saints. Is there a little bit of conspiracy theory about bringing in Doug Nussmeier as the offensive quarterback when Garrett is going to expect to be one of the top prospects this coming season?
That really picked up at OTAs a few weeks ago when Garrett was at the Saints practice facility talking to Kellen Moore on the sideline, following his dad around the field, watching practice. If it wasn't already a conspiracy theory, the tinfoil hats came on at that point. So I think it wouldn't shock me at all if there is something there. I mean, I don't see a level that Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler could realistically play at this year that would keep the Saints from drafting a QB next year if it's someone they really believe in, like Garrett Nussmeier or any of these other young guys who are expected to come out in next year's draft. Which not Arch Manning.
It would Well, it would make for a fun story there for in Louisiana to go from Baton Rouge to New Orleans for sure. Absolutely, that would be fun. So let's move on to the Derek Carr thing. How far out of left field did that come for you? And the fact that he decided to retire. I mean, the Saints were in a tough position to begin with, but was it easier that he decided to retire from the NFL than to just kind of say, I'm going to miss this season, but I'm going to try and come back?
Absolutely. It's ripping the Band-Aid off now. It's getting the salary cap books cleaned up now. The way it played out was as advantageous as it could be for the Saints. And it really shocked me because at no point last season was he listed on the injury report with a shoulder issue. It was never something that was under consideration. It was not something he was receiving treatment for. It was not on anyone's radar. And then all of a sudden his rotator cuff is busted and he needs surgery or he won't be able to throw again. And that just shocked everybody. And that too has led to some conspiracy theorying and people trying to connect dots and whatnot. And the way it played out kind of suggests that something went down here in the offseason that nobody wants to talk about. But it's one of those things that's kind of staying under wraps a bit. So we just don't know. But the way it was set up was when the Saints restructured his contract, he was guaranteed $40 million this year. And he had already been guaranteed $10 million in a roster bonus from last year. So what they agreed to do was the Saints would release him they would process his retirement, release him from his contract, and he would forfeit the 30 that he would have gotten from that restructure that he didn't want in the first place because he was ready. He wanted to go somewhere else. He wanted to go to Minnesota. He wanted to go to New York. He had other ambitions in mind. And kind of reading the tea leaves there, this is just my personal take on it from what I've heard and what I've been able to put together. My interpretation of events, I should say. I'm not reporting anything here. I don't do that. I have too much anxiety. I believe that there was some kind of an off-season non-football injury that occurred. I don't know if he was trying to reel in a swordfish or flipped over while skiing or something. I don't know. Something happened. And the Saints went to him and said, look, you can either give up the 30 and retire on your terms and look like a good guy for giving up $30 million, or we can take you to arbitration and we'll take the whole $40 million back because you screwed up. And it's plausible. I mean, he's got this YouTube channel where he's doing donuts in the Beamer with his brother, and I think there's some plausibility to that. If it'll ever come out for real, if we'll ever get the full story, I don't know. The Saints are not talking about it. Carr certainly does not want to talk about it. But that kind of seems that's my interpretation of events. And it was like you said, it came from left field, but it's behind us now, and we're going to move forward and see if the Saints can finally find a QB who can be that worthy successor to Drew Brees.
We move on to free agency. Paulson Adebo leaves. Derek Carr retires. Willie Gay, linebacker, leaves. Will Harris leaves. Ryan Ramczyk retires. Peyton Turner leaves. Marquez Valdez-Scantling signed to the Seahawks. Who are the most impactful losses that the Saints had in the offseason?
Yeah, you got to start with Paulson Adebo. He had been their starting cornerback ever since they drafted him. He led the team in pass breakups over the last 4 years. Probably led them in snaps played at cornerback over the last 4 years, to be honest, if I were to guess. At the same time, he's somebody that patience had kind of worn thin on, where he's a penalty magnet. I looked into this, and he leads the NFL in yards lost to defensive pass interference fouls since he was drafted. So he was kind of a boomer bust player, but he was someone that they were comfortable starting each week, and now they don't really have that guy. They've got Kool-Aid McKinstry coming back in year 2. He played well, but we haven't seen a lot from him. Alontae Taylor has had to move around a lot. He's kind of more of a nickel at this point, which could be a good thing in Brandon Staley's defense. I mean, Jalen Ramsey still talks, what's the word? There's a word for this, where he just brings it up of his own volition here of, oh man, I love playing the nickel in Brandon Staley's defense. I love being the star, and that's kind of the role they have in mind for Alontae Taylor. So, but beyond that, it's kind of odd. Like they signed one of their former backups in free agency, Isaac Yadam, who was with the 49ers and ironically coincidentally was working with Brandon Staley on the 49ers. He was an assistant on their defense. He didn't call plays or anything, but he worked very close with the secondary, their nickel packages. So that's somebody that the Saints know really well. Wouldn't shock me if he plays a lot of games for them this year. But yeah, out of the guys you listed, Adebo is the big loss. Marquez Valdez-Scantling played really well for the Saints down the stretch last year. So losing him, that hurt. But at the same time, like he was available in November for good reasons, and I'm not too torn up about playing Cedric Wilson Jr. instead of him, for example.
And in their free agent additions, you bring in Cam Akers at running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You've got Brandon Cooks back with the Saints.
Yeah.
Donovan Peoples-Jones, Dylan Raduns, I don't know how to pronounce that. And then Justin Reed as well. What were the moves that you feel, and you talked about Yadam, what do you think that the most important moves that they made in adding in free agency? They brought back Ugo Amadi. They brought back Chase Young. What were the most important free agent moves that they did?
Yeah, so the biggest addition to me definitely is Justin Reed. He got the biggest contract out of all of those guys. He has the biggest role in mind for him out of those guys. And he's really poised to be that, that heir apparent for Tyrann Mathieu, which is kind of funny when you look at their careers and how they played together in Kansas, I think he replaced him in Houston, replaced him in Kansas City. So this has kind of been, but it goes back even further because this is someone who they knew each other when they were playing prep high school ball in Louisiana. So it's kind of a really cool circle moment there. But as far as the football product, Justin Reed, outstanding run defender. That was something the Saints really struggled with last year, and I think he's going to do a lot to clean things up on the back end and kind of raise expectations back there a little bit, and because he's coming off of a repeat Super Bowl team, and that's a good presence to have in the locker room, and I'm excited to see how he does. Somebody else we didn't mention is they traded for Devon Gotcho from the Patriots, nose tackle. He's going to play a ton of snaps. He's going to be really key for them, I think, in moving from the 4-3 base that Dennis Allen was running to the 3-4 that Brandon Staley is more known for. So that's somebody to watch, but outside of all of that, the two big re-signings that they did were Chase Young and Juwan Johnson at tight end. And Johnson is in year 5 or 6 at this point. We're still waiting for him to break out. And it's kind of a now or never situation, but I mean, they just paid him $30 million, and Kellen Moore, personally was blowing up his phone late at night, trying to talk him into coming back and not going to Denver with Sean Payton. And not going to Seattle with Clint Kubiak, and clearly he was able to win that recruiting battle. So we'll see how that goes. Chase Young is going to be a key player, of course. Again, that's somebody you hope can be like the heir apparent for Cam Jordan up front, just like Justin Reed is in the back end for Tyrann Mathieu. And gosh, they need it. I mean, their pass rush, that is probably my biggest concern defensively, is the pass rush, because they didn't really add anybody to the mix. They're running it back with the same group. Cam is he's been playing since 2011 here. I think it's him and the Cards legend Calais Campbell are probably the two, oldest defenders in the league right now. They're awful close. And I think the Saints are really hoping that Chase Young can step up and let Cam have one more year and then take that job moving forward. So we'll see. This is definitely as you can tell from my analysis, this is very much a transitional year for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, and it sounds like but the tinfoil hats, quarterback, but they drafted a quarterback. So coming next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the. Let's move on to talk about the Saints and the draft, because they did get a quarterback. We'll see how that goes. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise of Sierra podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the web, talking to John Sigler from Saints Wire, talking about the Cardinals' first opponent of the year as they will face the Saints on the road in Week 1. And we go to the NFL draft. There was talk about the Saints going for a quarterback in round 1, namely if Shedeur Sanders was around. How serious? Well, obviously, there wasn't very much serious about Shedeur Sanders because he went all the way till day 3. But how much talk was there about the possibility of Shedeur falling to the Saints at 9 and he being the pick?
There was a ton of it coming from Deion Sanders. There was not much coming from the Saints side. My understanding is the Saints never had a first-round grade on Shedeur, that he was never in consideration. It was all Deion, really talking up like, hey, don't let him get to the Saints. If you want Shedeur, you better trade ahead of the Saints. You better come get him. He's not going to be there. He's not going to make it past 9. And that just wasn't the case. I mean, the week of Colorado's pro day or their pro showcase, or however they made it special and rebranded it, Kellen Moore was on the Saints owner Gail Bisson's private jet flying to Athens and Tennessee and Miami and going to see all these big pro days. I mean, he was in Ole Miss to go see Jackson Dart. He went and watched Cam Ward throw. He was really all over the place. He went to Ohio State to see their quarterback in person, and he didn't go to Colorado. And that's at that point I was like, okay, yeah, this is fake. Like this is all being driven by Colorado, by Deion Sanders, and rightfully so. I mean, as a coach, as a father, he owes it to try and stoke that fire and get Shedeur to a good place. And I do think he would have done well with the Saints, but obviously they liked Tyler Shuck much better, and that's who they went and got. And now he's competing with Arizona local Spencer Rattler to compete to win that starting job.
And with their first pick, instead, they take Kelvin Banks out of Texas, a tackle that was heavily discussed here in Arizona. I believed that he could have been the pick for the Cardinals had been around at number 16. Where does he figure in as a rookie?
Yeah, he's starting at left tackle right now. In OTAs, that's really where they settled in with their front 5. There was some speculation about that. Is he going to play guard? Is he going to play tackle? How does Talise Fuaga fit in here? How does Trevor Penning fit in here? And it seems like their idea is really, we're going to make it easy on these young guys. And Kelvin Banks is going to play left tackle just like he did at Texas. And Talise Fuaga is going to play right tackle like he did at Oregon State. And Trevor Penning is going to learn to play guard after he learned to play right tackle, because he can't play left tackle in the NFL. So that's kind of the way things have shaken out here. We'll see if that sticks come training camp. For his part, Banks has been very vocal, like, hey, just let me on the field, give me an opportunity to earn a roster spot, and I don't care if it's guard or tackle, I'll go. So he's been a good sport about it, but it seems like the Saints really want to have him at his college position. And hopefully he and Fuaga can be, a pretty solid set of bookends for the Saints as they rebuild up front.
It's a good thing to have when you've got a young quarterback, which brings us to Tyler Shuck out of Louisville, who played at college. Like, he was in college as long, and probably John, you were still in college when he's made his debut. We like to joke about that on the podcast with my co-host. That I'm 48 years old, so
hey man, I'm 33. I just missed him. Okay, class of 2014 here. No, so this is kind of cool actually. I wrote an article a couple weeks ago. Actually, let me scroll up here. Yeah, the 1st of June. Talking about Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck always being in each other's orbit in the Arizona prep football scene, but never actually competing head to head here. And instead, they both got beaten up by Cameron Jordan's alma mater at Chandler High a year after year in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So it's really cool just how these how all these connections come into play here. So when the Saints drafted Shuck, Rattler was like, you. So they've always kind of been conscious of each other, and they've been in each other's orbit, and now they get to finally go at it head to head.
How much of a competition is it really this offseason? Is it that Shuck's the favorite and that Rattler's going to have to significantly outpresent? They got 7 games of tape on Rattler last year. He and Haener go combined 0-7. Obviously, Rattler highly touted coming out of high school, and then sort of his college career sort of fizzled out, but they loved him coming out of the Senior Bowl in the off season, and he got a chance to start. Like, how close do you think that competition is going to be throughout the remainder of the off season?
Oh man, it's a real competition. They were trading days with Rattlers with the first string offense one day, Shuck gets it the next day. Jake Haener was in there too until he had pulled a muscle and had to be taken out of practice for a few weeks. But the Saints, I don't know how the Cards do it. The Saints only open up one OTAs session each week to the media, and from what one of the best reporters on the Saints beat is Nick Underhill at New Orleans Football. He was charting the passes on the days they were in attendance, and the day they were in between those two sessions, Rattler threw 59 passes, completed 45. Threw 1 pick. Shuck threw 59 passes, completed 44, threw 1 pick. So they're right neck and neck, it seems, here, if you're just looking at those numbers. So this is a real competition. I do expect Shuck to pull away. Rattler, it's kind of what you see every summer, where the more experienced player has an edge early on, just because they're more comfortable. They know who they're throwing to, and that kind of gets eroded with the more time that the new guy gets in the offense. And I expect Shuck to pull away with this by September, but it is very much a real competition, and Rattler could very well run away with it. We'll just have to wait and see.
Which brings us to round 3, where they took Vernon Broughton, big defensive tackle out of Texas, and safety Jonas Sanker out of Virginia. Sanker, I know, was a guy. Actually, both Broughton and Sanker were guys that were on draft Twitter, on that draft that's not big draft. They were well liked. Big draft has big, you've got the big guys, but then like when you get the other analysts and my co-host of this show had a draft podcast as well, and he was both. He was high on both Broughton and Sanker, especially the Broughton being in that really deep defensive line class. Round 3 this year probably goes higher in other years where the draft class isn't as deep.
Yeah, that's something that Mickey Loomis, the Saints GM, talked about. Was Broughton was somebody that they had graded as a 2nd-round pick. They were if Shuck hadn't been there, that was someone they would have considered, and they were very happy to get him at a 71, I think it was 70, 76, something in that range. And GMs say that all the time, but that does like, we would have loved, we would have been happy getting this guy around early. We love getting him around later. But just based off what I've heard from other people who've been covering the draft, other guys, in the draft Twitter, the football cognoscenti is, I think that's how Dan Hansis puts it. Broughton was pretty well thought of, pretty highly regarded, and the Saints got him at a good spot, and hopefully he can get on the field early and make a difference. Sanker too, kind of a playmaker on the back end, somebody that could develop into, maybe he's the Tyrann Mathieu heir apparent, and Justin Reed can kind of focus on doing his own thing. We'll have to see. But both of those guys, to me, are playmakers. They're technically sound. They're high-end athletes. Sanker specifically had some pretty strong leadership qualities in college, and I think they're both going to do well in the roles that the Saints have in mind for them.
Do you feel that either one of them will have any sort of impactful role, whether it's special teams or they'll be part of the defensive rotation?
Yeah, Broughton I expect to rotate in pretty often, just depending on how that defensive line shakes out. That's really a point of intrigue. Is what is Brandon Staley going to do with this defensive line? Is he going to have 4 down linemen? Is he going to have 3? Is he going to use a lot of 5 techs? Is he going to have guys shade in to the 4I? Like, how is that going to develop? And where are guys like Vernon Broughton going to fit in? Where is Brian Brzee going to fit in? As for Sanker, I think special teams is probably where we're going to see him right out of the gates. And the Saints have a history of that, of having these round 2, round 3 picks playing special teams. That's where Pete Werner first started out. That's where Alontae Taylor first started out. They've got JT Gray has been an all-pro special teamer for them a couple times as a former undrafted free agent. So that is something that they've valued historically. We'll see how that changes with the new coaching staff. But I think both of those guys will have opportunities to make a difference this year.
Round 4, Danny Stutzman, linebacker at Oklahoma, and Quincy Riley, Louisville quarterback. Round 6, Kansas running back Devin Neal. Round 7, UCLA tight end Malike Matavao, and Syracuse edge Fadil Diggs. Who, if any of those guys, have any impact in year 1?
I think the best bet, and a lot of Saints fans aren't going to want to hear this because they want to love Devin Neal so badly. The Saints fans are craving Devin Neal. They're wanting to see him do well. The guy I'm betting on would be Quincy Riley, that round 4 corner from Louisville. If he had been healthy, he probably would have been a second-round pick. And he is a highly experienced, highly pressed corner. He's not afraid to mix it up at the line of scrimmage, to make plays, try and make plays on the ball. And he's got pro size and agility. And I've heard just nothing but good things from about him. And I'm very eager to see how he does. And I kind of point him out because, like we talked about earlier, the Saints, they have a vacancy at corner right now where you need 3 and they have 2. And it's like, are they really going to play Isaac Yiadom all year? Or is Quincy Riley going to compete and take that job? Or is another guy like last year, an undrafted rookie who played really well was Rico Payton from Pittsburgh State, the Gorillas. He did really well in special teams, but I tell you, he played so well in coverage in the preseason that I think he won a roster spot because of that. So this is a real competition at that corner spot. I think Quincy Riley has a great shot, and I'm really eager to see him get on the field come training camp.
Coming up next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, SR Cardinals Talk of the Web. Let's move on to the 2025 season. Expectations, hopes, dreams, what John Sigler thinks will happen in 2025. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise of Sierra podcast, special Cardinals Talk on the Web, on the line, talking to John Sigler from the Saints Wire, the managing editor over there. We've talked about the offseason. We've talked about the draft and free agency. Let's look ahead to 2025. It's not very hopeful, is it? What do you think what are the legitimate expectations for the Saints from their fan base in 2025?
So fans are just hoping for a good time right now. They
just want vibes. I guess they want vibes and they want some hope. Not a bad team that has, like, you've got some young players, but like if Shuck's no good, if Rattler's no good, but at least if some of your young players are like, okay, this looks like they're competitive. But otherwise, yeah, I remember that feeling. That was the Cardinals in 2023 when by the end of the year they were they were a good bad team. They were a bad team, but they were a good bad team.
yeah. So, and that's exactly it. Like, fans, they want to see a lot of the young guys. They want to see Jonas Sanker playing a lot of snaps. They want to see Danny Stutzman playing a lot of snaps and getting better each week and getting those opportunities and not losing snaps to, like, love DeMario Davis, but fans don't want to see, Danny Stutzman on the bench behind a 36-year-old Demario Davis, and that they want to see these younger guys getting those opportunities to develop and be part of the future for this team and be part of the solution. And as for the record, I'm predicting, I think 6-11 is what I had back when the schedule released. I'll circle back later this summer, and we'll see how expectations change. But yeah, I don't think the Saints are going to be so bad that they're going to have the first pick. And I know they're the odds-on favorite for that right now, and that's kind of the national expectation. But there is some merit to the idea that, well, they lost so many games last year because they were so injured, and the offense was so bad because both of the leading receivers were out, and the starting quarterback was out, and I think there is some merit to that, and I don't know that they're going to be much worse than they were when they just won 5 games, but I just don't see a very high ceiling right now. Just with so much is new, so much is uncertain. We're leaning on, you and I made our picks for the breakout player for our teams here as for the NFL Wires Network, and mine was 28-year-old tight end Juwan Johnson, and it's like, man, if he hasn't broken out by year 6, then when is he going to break out? But that's kind of where they're at because they had so many bad draft classes. Peyton Turner left for the Cowboys. He was their first rounder in 2021. Only played a handful of games, never really showed anything. That's just one player, but that's kind of an example of why this team has been bad. Like, they have not drafted and developed. They have not sustained success, and a lot of chickens have come home to roost. And I think 6-11 is my prediction for this year, and hopefully they beat that. But I won't be shocked if that's right around where things fall.
Well, it is promising, the fact that we've seen Brandon Staley have a track record defensively of having a good unit. So by probably mid-season to the end of the year, New Orleans, as long as he believes he has the personnel to do it, should be a tough game. It should be a tough game because schematically his units are good. Offensively, that depends on the quarterback play. You guys have talent at the skill positions, but it comes down to the play of the quarterback there. And yeah, so I and fans here look at that season opener, and we're rubbing our hands, champing at the bit, because we face a young Saints team with a head coach making his head coach debut, either a day 3 pick from last year who didn't win a game, or a second round rookie making his National Football League debut. And we see that game as a likely win. What do Saints fans view the Cardinals game in that week 1 at home? They're at home, where historically the Saints do play well.
Yeah, they're excited. They're eager for that challenge, and from what I've gathered, a lot of Saints fans look at this as like a good measuring stick, a good barometer game, because the Cardinals are kind of where they want this team to get to, as far as being competitive week in and week out, having Pro Bowl players on both sides of the ball, having an exciting young QB, having a solid head coach. And that's kind of where they want to be. And if we can't hang with a team like that, then obviously we're not that type of team. So, yeah, the Saints, they do have that week 1 win streak going back to 2019, I believe. But that's been a couple of head coach changes ago, and I wouldn't bet on that too strongly.
And the Saints do have a brutal start to the season.
Yeah. So
Cardinals, they play almost the entire NFC West in the first 3 weeks. Cardinals, 49ers, Seahawks, and then the Bills. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And that's kind of led some people to think, well, maybe we should have Spencer Rattler start until the bye week, and then give Tyler Shuck a chance. Maybe then we'll throw him to the Wolves. But yeah, it's going to be rough. We're going to learn a lot about this team. We're really going to learn a lot about their mental fortitude, and whether all of these team building exercises they're doing in June carry over to September and in October, and whether that means anything, and whether they can rally around each other, and whether that storms. So it's exciting, but I would really describe the vibe as a guarded optimism, cautious optimism. We're going to give them a shot, but we're not going to expect too much out of these guys just yet. They've got to earn it.
And if they end up being as bad as some project, you got your conspiracy theory. You've got Garrett Nussmeier's dad as your offensive coordinator.
Well, and you've also got all of the important people in Arch Manning's life sitting in the box with Mickey Loomis on Sundays, and so we will see. We'll see how things develop. There's a lot of intrigue surrounding this team, and I'm really eager for the summer to pass us by so we can get right to it.
All right. Well, with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the Best of Our Cardinals Talk. With a big thank you to John Sigler, where you can find his work over at the Saints Wire. John, are you on social media at all? And if they can, how can my fans, if they want to interact with you on X, Twitter, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on X, the Everything app. You can find me on Twitter at John_Sigler with 2 R's. It's JOHN_SIGLERR. So thanks for having me on the program today, Jess. So it's a good talk, and hopefully we can recap a surprise Saints wins on September 7th, 8th time.
Yep. Well, we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks for listening. As always, we will have more opponent preview shows, 14 in I don't know how many days, but we will. This was probably the first one. I don't know the order that I'm going to produce, but probably this will be the first one. So you've got 13 more opponent previews to look forward to. Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.